My name is Stephen Asari. I'm a mechanical engineer by profession. Currently the head of property for Standard Chartered Bank, responsible for 5 departments: engineering project, health and safety, security, and facilities and business continuity planning. Before I joined the bank, I worked with Unilever as the head of projects for West Africa. I'm here basically to share with you some basic tips around business continuity planning. And like she said, my colleague Michael will take you through the cyber space area. Before I start with my presentation, I would just like us to put on our imagination caps and assume we are about 30,000 feet above the ground in an aeroplane that develops a fault beyond repair and is destined for a crash. Let's also imagine if the pilot should tell us that we shouldn't worry, and he's going to activate the parachute for the aeroplane so we can continue our journey and land safely. These are the kind of capabilities and possibilities that come with having a business continuity plan. I'm sure we've all been caught unaware with the consequences of the current COVID-19 pandemic and its effect on our respective businesses. I must also emphasize that businesses that have had a BCP or business continuity plan are the ones that are really surviving in these times. So in a nutshell, business continuity plan, I'll just say it's a plan B of your current situation, where you create systems and processes that make it able for your business to prevent and recover potential threats to a company during times of disasters and pandemics. It's basically a document or a plan, which has been well thought out in terms of how your business is going to continue operating in times in times where you have pandemics, etc. I'll just share some statistics with you, where it states that 40% of businesses never reopen after a disaster. Also, 25% of businesses that reopen fail within a year after disaster. I'll just go through a few disasters that has happened over the past few months. We all heard about the fires, the bushfires in Australia, the Amazons in Brazil. I'm sure we all know about Hurricane Katrina, and also the Japan tsunami. We all know about the Ebola, the SARS, and the MERS, and the various floods we've had in Ghana. We are currently dealing with the COVID-19, which is still a fluid situation, as we still count the cost in terms of the adverse effects it's had on us as individuals, our homes, and also our businesses. So like I said, it's the businesses that have BCP arrangement that are now surviving currently. And some benefits that come with having a business continuity plan is basically building confidence among your clients, customers, and employees. For us as Standard Chartered Bank, I must say, through our rigid BCP plans, we have been able to unleash our Plan B capabilities in terms of IT capabilities, working from home. We are currently having only 10% of staff working from the office and also the branches. And we are still delivering optimum services to our clients, minimum risk. The second benefit of having a business continuity plan is basically to mitigate the risk and also any financial exposure that might come with any pandemic or disaster that occurs. I must go back to the point that we cannot prevent disasters. Disasters are always going to happen. What can be prevented is the tragedy. So let's try and focus on preventing the tragedies that come with disasters. And I believe business continuity planning is a very good tool, effective tool that can help individuals and businesses continue to operate in times of pandemics or disaster. It is a very simple tool which any kind of business, be it small or medium scale enterprise, can develop. So I'll take you through the various steps in terms of how to have a business continuity plan. And I'll then take you through a case scenario of how Standard Chartered has been able to go through these trying times. The first thing is to basically identify a planning team that is going to identify the potential threats and hazards in the business. So in Standard Chartered Bank, this team is basically chaired by the CEO or the managing director of the bank, where you have HR sitting on board, you have IT, relevant businesses or functions, within your business sitting in the planning team. You have HR, you have finance, you have IT, you have corporate affairs, and you also have risk and audit in the team. So it's not wholesale for every organization. One needs to just look through the relevant teams or critical teams that really are needed, to work or to make sure the plan is activated during times of disaster. Once the team has been identified, you conduct a risk assessment. Every business has its own risk in terms of exposure, and one needs to just think out of the box in terms of what kind of disasters or things that can cause the business not to operate. So you identify your various threats or potential threats and hazards that can stop your business from operating, thus affecting your clients. Once you have identified these threats, you basically put a plan underway in terms of how you analyze the impact that is going to have, this risk is going to have on your business. Once that is done, you create a plan around the analysis that you've done in terms of a strategy that you developed to make sure that you can mitigate these risks. So I'll go through the first 4 steps. You identify a planning team or the core team. You do your risk assessment in terms of the potential exposures peculiar to your businesses. Then you create an impact analysis in terms of what these risks can do to the operations of your business. Then you create an action plan or a strategy around how you can navigate around these risks, minimizing it to the barest minimum, thus not affecting your client and your business operation. The fifth and the most important one is you need to test, the plan that you have developed. Once you test the plan, you come out with certain gaps, and these gaps you can keep closing through your various reviews. So for Standard Chartered Bank, for instance, we have 3 BCP tests that we activate every year. Even when we don't have disasters, we just activate it to make sure that the plan is still active, it's live, review it. Are there any gaps? We have what we call a call tree, where we can just activate the call tree, and every line manager is supposed to call their direct reports to ensure that you record the time that they pick the call first, to account for the number of people, especially when a disaster strikes. You first need to account for the number of people who have not been hit by the disaster. Then you follow up with the rest of the plan. You need to also train the people who are going to carry out the business continuity plan in terms of your critical staff. They need to be trained. They need to be the reviews. They need to come out with the gaps as they practice. The plan. They come out with gaps identified, and then the relevant supporting functions or teams help them in closing these gaps. And like I said, one needs to conduct reviews. We have it 3 times a year. So we are always prepared that in case anything should happen, Standard Chartered Bank will continue to serve its clients as if nothing has happened. And you also need to have improvement plans, because the world is changing from an analog to a digital world. So you need to improve on your plan. You can have version 1, version 2, based on the kind of improvement sessions that you have. And like we have 3 activations in a year, so you repeat it every year, and it has to become part of your institutional culture, where BCP becomes a BAU for the business, just in case anything strikes. I'll take you through what Standard Chartered Bank did during this COVID-19. So as far back as February 13th, February 3rd, we had our first crisis management meeting where we activated the crisis management basically to follow through this current crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic. We hadn't had a case in Ghana yet. However, based on our culture, we need to trigger these things because we do not know what is going to happen. We need to assess the risk, that is really coming out of this whole pandemic. So as far back as February 3rd, Standard Chartered Bank activated this crisis management meeting to go through our business continuity planning. What we basically did was to look at the things that we would need to do to ensure that we still operate in case this crisis came to Ghana, and also how we are prepared to continue serving our clients. We started ordering supplies, face masks, gloves, and stocking sanitizers as far back as beginning of February. And we started testing our BCP where we had 50% of staff working from home, unleashing our IT capabilities, testing how people can work from home if this pandemic, worsened. We did it successfully with few gaps here and there. We closed it as we perfected it over 2 weeks. And the hallmark of all this was a week before the president announced the complete lockdown, Standard Chartered Bank had simulated a complete lockdown scenario in our head office where 90% of staff worked from home and continued to serve clients through its various digital channels in our branches. We were really well prepared, and we have been minimally impacted, with this whole pandemic. As I speak, 90% of our staff are still working from home using our various planning tools that we had unleashed during the course of the crisis. So back to the points of developing a BCP plan. We followed through all these plans, and I must say we are happy to share any lessons we've learned with any of the institutions on this webinar. I would pause here and hand over to my colleague, Michael, who will take us through issues around cyberspace. Like I said, 90% of our staff are working from home, and there are risks associated with some of these ways of working in terms of exposure, cyber exposure. So I'll hand over to Michael, who will take us through how Standard Chartered has been protecting its business in the cyberspace. Over to you, Michael. Thank you.
All right. So good afternoon once again, everybody. My name is Michael, and I'm in charge of information and cybersecurity risk in Standard Chartered. Prior to joining Standard Chartered, I was with Ecobank Transnational Incorporated, where I worked as the business information security officer of the group. So with this afternoon's session, I'll take over from where Stephen left off and give a brief primer into how the business continuity planning works and how we see it from an information and cybersecurity perspective. So I'll quickly go through an overview of the cyber threat, trends and impact, and go into more detail with the planning stages of the business continuity management component. All right. So globally, when you look at it from when you look at information and cybersecurity from what all regulators are concerned about, there are 6 key items that is of big interest. We have accountability and culture, where we are looking at how the concept of information and cybersecurity is appreciated right from the governance levels of every organization. So with that, we are looking at it from a board perspective to senior management and down to the shop floor. Then another area of interest is third-party management. There's no business today that can run end-to-end without involving other parties to support its own product delivery. Then we look at resilience of the business. Now, the thinking usually is that cybersecurity is only dealing with the technical side of the business, but it's a broad spectrum that covers both information security and also the cyber aspect. True, the cyber aspect is a majority, but there are other aspects of it also that needs to be considered. And if you do a round end-to-end 360 degrees view and make sure all bases are covered, then your business becomes resilient. We have risk-based approaches to considering how risks are managed and incident management. As another final part of the interest from regulators, how information is shared, because with an with information about vulnerabilities that exist in one area of a business or an industry, it's useful to share with other members of the industry so that that same kind of incident can be prevented or minimized with the risk minimized. So, in terms of impacts of threats to information and cybersecurity, we look at it in three spheres. There are the direct impacts, there are the indirect impact, and the intangible cost, right? With the direct impact, you are looking at it from a perspective of where issues happened and it's of a cyber attack nature, or is also as a result of failures in controls or anything. There are the parts where you have to go through. If you are a regulated industry, you have to go through regulatory sanctions. Apart from possible regulatory sanctions, you would also have to do some remediation and also some investigation. All that are costs that would probably not have been factored in your planning at the beginning of your financial year. Now, with the indirect cost, you're looking at things like as a result of you getting compromised or you getting into an issue, your potential customers also get issues. So a bank is hacked, for instance, or a bank goes into a scenario where they lose some money directly to their ledger, but in addition to that, some of their customers also lose money because the attackers found it easy to hit their accounts also, right? So that becomes an indirect cost to you, but it's a direct cost to that customer, and it was as a result of your negligence. Then, in terms of intangible costs, yes, we have things like damage to the brand. If Stanchart was not able to continue doing business in BAU mode transparently to our customers, we'll probably be having some reputational issues to deal with, and we'll have customers complaining. So, in brief, from an ICS perspective, we look at confidentiality to data or information assets, we look at the integrity, and we look at availability. And looking at business continuity, this falls directly under availability requirement or availability tenet of the information security spectrum, but also falls within the integrity and confidentiality spectrums. Because if in a pandemic like this one we are facing, if the systems are out or the people are not available to provide the service using the systems, then there's an unavailability of the business and support to our customers. Now, if even the systems are available, because of the pandemic, a lot of organizations are doing changes on the fly. Some of these changes have the potential to impact the integrity of the information assets or the confidentiality. If there was something that was restricted for usage by a few identified members of the organization, as a result of this pandemic, there's a potential that it will be opened up and made accessible to anybody because there's not been enough testing in the background to ascertain that even during scenarios like this, we'll maintain the confidentiality to our information assets, we'll maintain the integrity of the asset. There will be no unnecessary or unplanned changes, and the systems will continue to be available. So, from a cybersecurity perspective, this is how we look at it. Now, we'll go through in the next couple of slides, look at some key details about how we go through the planning deliberately and some of the ideas that you could probably adopt in your own organizations and how the planning really happens. So, from a business continuity management perspective, we are looking at having to plan to be able to deal with difficult scenarios when they come up. And at a high level, some of the losses or potential loss categories, if you fail to do the business continuity planning, is things that border around revenue losses. Permanent or temporary interruptions to your cash flow could be a significant factor. Um, Compromised customer services, interrupting uh, interruptions to either your internal or external customer service. You could encounter extra expenses that you didn't plan for or budget for. Now, almost every company that didn't used to do online services or online meetings, for instance, is being forced to get into it. A couple of weeks ago, we heard that Zoom, what we are using currently for this webinar, had encountered several vulnerabilities, and I'm sure a lot of companies were heavily involved in its usage just after the pandemic situation got worse, and probably have not had the time to go through the configurations and testing to be sure that even if they use the platform, they will not be susceptible to some of the gaps that existed. You look at things like contract violations. If you have signed a contract with a customer that you are going to deliver X service within certain SLAs, and your services become unavailable or your people become unavailable because there's a lockdown and you don't fall into the category of essential services, how do you deliver on your contract? There are going to be some issues there. There might be some penalty clauses that will be called in. Even though the pandemic is affecting everybody, every company is going to take it individually with you. So those are some of the issues. There's loss of confidence. There's also failure to meet legal and regulatory requirements. And now this is a big one in our country. It doesn't seem to play out often, but it's a big one because the worst case in that scenario would be loss of your operating license. Now, as my colleague Stephen said, more than 40% of businesses never reopen after major natural disasters. Now, aside the natural disasters, there's also another estimate from Gartner that says that for every minute of unplanned downtime, the cost to organizations on average is $5,600. Now, it depends on your organization. Some organizations may lose more. If you take a scenario where, for example, Amazon may go down, right? In that scenario, what they are losing or they will be losing per minute is far in excess of $5,600. But in some smaller companies, this may be a figure that they can relate to. So, with all this said and done, the program is very crucial to build customers in your employees and build customers in your confidence in your customers. Sorry, employees will be able to beat their chest and say, even though there was this problem, everybody was facing it. My organization was able to meet it, just like how we are touting our, uh, our success in these times where we had a lot of downtime, a lot of outages, but because of the planning that as a bank Standard Chartered had done, we are able to continue serving you without anybody even noticing that we're working with everybody at home. So there are some concepts also that I think everybody needs to be aware of. Sometimes we use them interchangeably. We talk about disaster recovery planning. We talk about incident response management. We talk about crisis management. We talk about contingency planning. We talk about BCP. But what is the difference between all of these? Are they the same as the other? Can they really be used interchangeably? Not really, even though to a large extent that's what gets done. The business continuity management is the overall set of processes and resources. So in terms of overall resources, processes, you have disaster recovery planning, which may be more relevant to an organization than the other. Now, disaster recovery planning looks more at building continuity capabilities for critical IT infrastructure and applications. So in a typical disaster recovery plan, you would have, if my data center A fails, I should be able to switch to my disaster site. So I have system A in the primary data center. I probably make a provision for a mirrored system in my secondary data center so that if this one goes down, I can quickly fall back on the other one. That is part of disaster recovery planning. From incident management may not go all the way to become a disaster. It could be a simple incident like um, a critical system getting infected by a virus, and you would have to restore your backups. The fact that you have envisaged that a virus could affect that system, and therefore you need to have a backup in place so that in that instance you can restore the data back to a freshly provisioned system, could be an incident response plan. But incident response plan happen more frequently than disasters, so they are categorized differently. From a crisis management perspective, every event that, according to your organization, can be categorized as a crisis falls in that category. And the contingency planning are processes that you develop in advance. Every arrangement that you put in place in advance to deal with any situation that escalates into a crisis. Now, that also covers a broad spectrum of different planning components that every organization should have in place. So all these put together now becomes your business continuity management or business continuity plan. Now, we'll quickly go through some of the stages. Stephen has highlighted them at a high level, but I want to go a bit deeper so that you kind of have a feel of how it gets done. And if you don't have one already in place, this will form ideas around how to get it in place. Now, I put it in 5 simple steps, right? 5 steps that you can use to go through your business continuity planning. Excuse me. Now, the first step is conducting your risk assessment. Second step is conducting what we refer to as a business impact analysis. Then the third step is developing the plan. And then fourth, creating awareness around the plan. And then the fifth step is the testing and maintenance. Now, these steps should be done in an iterative manner. Iterative in the sense that every time you go through the cycle, you will realize something that you may have missed out in the first time, or something that would be suggested as an improvement that you could actually take into consideration. So I'll quickly go through them. For step 1 and 2, these are usually used interchangeably or sometimes merged, but it's basically trying to go through a risk assessment to understand the exposure that your business has and what steps need to be taken to address it. So that is like the high level of the program or the high level of the business continuity planning stages. That tells you that there's an exposure that needs to be addressed. Now, if you go to step two is that phase where you try to identify your business processes, you try to identify your resource requirements when you need to resume critical business processes, and you also identify how you prioritize recovery steps. So if you take a business impact analysis, the first step would be to identify your business processes. If you're a bank, you probably know that serving your customers in terms of them being able to withdraw money, them being able to have their internet banking, them being able to have their online, their ATMs available, having their mobile app available at all times could be some of your critical business processes. So in the impact assessment, you go back and look at the impact of a disruption to these critical services. What could cause my internet banking to go down, or what could cause my teles or my provision of banking services to customers not to be available? Now, once you think about it that way, you are able to step back and identify key components that sum up to provide that particular service. Once you identify that service or the processes and the components that support that services, you go to look at what systems support it. So that's when you go through your inventory. Now, in going through the inventory, you also look at things like how critical is this over the other. If you have a full set of your asset inventory that supports your business processes, you are able to go to the next step to identify which ones are more critical than other. That's what we call the criticality assessment. Then you also go a step further to perform the risk assessment or the threat assessment to each of that asset. If this asset goes out, what happens? If because of a flooding in your organization, you can't have access to this the premises, for example, the premises is one of your assets. The asset is anything that delivers value to your organization. So the person delivering the frontline activity could be an asset. The server providing that activity could be an asset. The premises you operate out of could be an asset, right? So you need to list it. Every business has their own set of assets. Now, once you go through this assessment to identify the assets, identify the criticality, and identify what you need to resume quickly in terms of in case there are disruptions, then you kind of start to have the beginnings of a plan, right? At this point in the business impact assessment, you don't know what you are going to do. You just have identified systems, processes, people, key things that help you to develop whatever service or business product that you deliver to your customers. You are able to identify which one is critical and which one is not. And you have been able to identify
in the event of a disaster or a crisis, you want to focus on those which are the most critical to your business operations and processes. So in terms of completing a business impact assessment, those are the things that you'll be looking out for. What is critical? How much of the pain can we take as a business? What is the impact of the disruption? What does the outage mean to my business? And how quickly do I need to resume? And if I'm resuming, if I have 10 processes, which ones do I need to bring up first? And which one will I bring last, in that order? So basically, in the business impact assessment phase, that is what you are looking for. Now, in the third phase is the development of the plan itself. Now, in the development of the plan, the key thing is to get the key stakeholders involved in those processes to be part of the plan development. Because if you start doing the plan in isolation of the rest of the owners or stakeholders, you will make certain assumptions that may not be accurate. So in a real incident, they will not work. If IT knows that to bring up a backup tape is going to take 8 hours, and you assume that because your process needs it to be back within 1 hour, you put that down in your plan. In an incident, once you go to IT and IT says the system is down, we have to restore the backup. You ask them how long will it take, and they say it takes 8 hours. And you said no, it can't be 8 hours because we've documented 1 hour. Then there's a problem. That means that you didn't know, or it wasn't well articulated with the right people involved. So developing the plan in detail with the right stakeholders is very key after your business impact assessment. Now, in developing the plan, you can go all the way down to departmental plans and system plans. But you don't look at it from just a disaster recovery perspective. You look at it from a business continuity perspective. That means that you're looking at the business providing the end goal, service, or product to the customer. All right. And then the fourth stage is creating the right awareness. With the right awareness, executive management needs to be part of it. They need to know the plan. They need to know the reasons why the plans have been designed that way. You need to hold meetings. You need to discuss it with all the stakeholders, and also make the plans available to the stakeholders. Then the step 5 is testing. I can't overemphasize enough how much testing the plan is key. For the most organizations, they might have very beautiful plans documented in a lot of pages and stored somewhere. but nobody really knows what's in the plans. So when there's an incident, you will have told your customers that, you know, sometimes in getting a service, you ask the guy, do you have a business continuity plan? They'll say yes. And when you ask them to show you, they will give you a copy that these are our business continuity plans, but it's never been tested. So during a real incident, you realize that they themselves, they are fumbling. And you as a customer, you are not getting the service that you need, even though they assured you that they had a plan. So testing of the plan is very key. You start by doing tabletop exercises and discussions, and in each discussion or in each exercise, you adjust the plan and you correct it, or you add more detail so that you get to a point where the plan should be flawless. In the case of Standard Chartered, we had already thought of scenarios like when we can't come to the office. So we already do what we refer to as work from home on a normal day. Because sometimes when the plan gets developed, you need to be doing it frequently so that when it happens, even if people don't have copies of the plan, they know what is expected of them in terms of processes and procedures. In terms of having other sites, some of the plans are that you probably have to have a backup site. You probably even have to have a business continuity area, assuming the office space doesn't become available because of one reason or the other. Not that there's a lockdown, but maybe there's flooding in the building. So you can't sit. This one doesn't have to do with data center. You can't sit at your office space. What do? You should be able to go to a business continuity site, or you should be able to work from home, as we are seeing in this current scenario. So this is, as a high level, what it takes to go through the planning. And in the next 2 minutes so that I can take some questions. So after talking about how to develop the plan, I also wanted to raise a few challenges that a lot of organizations face in developing a BCP program. Now, top on the list is the commitment to the BCP program. In regulated industries, like the bank, the telecom, the health industry, these are some of the mandated requirements to have a business continuity plan. So you might get organizations where at the senior level, they see it as a tick in the box and would like somebody, and mostly it falls on IT, that the head of IT, you go and do this, go and develop it, make sure we have it in place, right? But the senior management themselves are not involved in the process. They are not partaking in what it takes to even go through the whole cycle that we discussed in the earlier slide. So it becomes something that is a checklist and that is unusable during a real scenario. Gradually, I talked about what the regulators look out for, and gradually they are making some of these things accountabilities for the senior management and boards to be sure that somebody is looking at it from the high level and not looking at it from a checklist approach. They are looking at it because they are interested. Now, the second problem or the second challenge I mentioned earlier on is about wrong assumptions used in the planning stage. If you make the wrong assumptions in your business continuity planning, the cost can be very high. You find out at a very wrong time that those assumptions you made were wrong and therefore cannot support the business process or the business resumption in the event of a real scenario. The third challenge that I've seen so far is a lack of a communication plan. Sometimes you have beautiful plans about how to resume certain services, how to, fall back on different services, how to get contingency plans in place for different components of your plans, but there's no communication plan. Now, communication plan is very simple, but very key. The communication plan would ensure that there's no disinformation to all your stakeholders. Your stakeholders include your internal staff, your external staff, your regulators, your third parties or fourth parties, and also anybody who is your customer. If you don't have a communication plan, sometimes it gets to a point where customers or your internal staff or your regulators form their own opinions, and then you have to double track backwards to go and correct the opinions they formed or the information they've heard from other parties, and try to now give them the right picture, which can be to your disadvantage. So it is very key that you address that with adequate communication plans for all stakeholders. Identify your stakeholders as part of the business impact assessment phase. For your board, what are you going to tell them if this particular scenario happens? For your employees, what are you going to tell them if this particular scenario happens? For your customers, what are you going to tell them? And as much as possible, script the message in advance. It doesn't have to be very accurate, but script it to an extent so that if it happens during the incident, everybody is doing something and there's no coordination or no proper planning. Certain information you might even give out yourself as the organization may be wrong. So coordinate the response, script the messages, have templates in advance for all possible scenarios. Once you test the scenario, look at the communication plan internally and externally and have a message ready for that scenario. Then the fourth challenge I've seen so far is also on the lack of awareness, training, and testing. If there are stakeholders, or let me use the word actors, in your BCP plan, they should be aware that they are actors. They should be aware of their roles if certain scenarios occur. And they should be aware of what to do during those scenarios. So in the BCP, in the BIA stage, you might come up with so many scenarios: flooding of the building, flooding of work areas, flooding of the data center, fires, pandemics, virus incidents, cyber attacks, ransomwares. You can come up with so many scenarios. As many of the scenarios that you come up with, there should be a plan to address those scenarios specifically. And anybody who plays a role in addressing that particular scenario should know that in this scenario, this is my role. This is what I'm supposed to do. Whether the person is supposed to give design communication, whether the person is supposed to be the one restoring the system physically, whether the person is supposed to be the warden, ensuring that everybody leaves the building and taking the head count or taking the note of who was in the building at the time. Everybody who has a part to play in the testing should be aware of the plan. And the plan should be routinely tested. When it's routinely tested, it gets to a point where people are already aware of the plan to an extent that when it happens, they know exactly what to do and it flows. When you get to that point, it makes things so easy and it makes things seem as if there's no problem. And that is what every organization is really looking for. Now, to simplify that, the whole plan, because from what I've said so far, you might realize that it has a lot of components to it. We suggest the use of playbooks. Playbooks, they are a term used in American football a lot for designing team strategies and plays. And in those games, in that game, the coach holds the playbook and he has so many plays depending on the opponent's strategy they adopt. They study the plans of the opponents, they study their games, they study the players, and they document it. They actually have a book. They document it. So when the opponent brings in a certain player, they fall back to the playbook and says, okay, for this player, this is our own reaction. This is how you do it. So using a playbook concept helps a lot in simplifying what is required from a BCP plan. You need to have the BCP document, yes, because those have to be detailed. But in terms of how to create the awareness, in terms of how to get everybody involved, in terms of making sure that people don't have to read too much, because people get, bored when their function is not, handling BCM. Their function is the teller. Their function is restoring a service. Their function is customer care. And you want them to read your whole BCP plan. Sometimes it becomes very challenging. But if you design it in the form of a playbook, maybe a one-pager matrix for one scenario, that asks all the right questions. Who is supposed to do what? How is the incident supposed to be picked up? Who is supposed to report to who else? how the information needs to flow in the incident, what you are supposed to do as actor A versus actor B. Everybody knows their part. Then, when you put all that together for one scenario, in the testing phase, everybody has that scenario. Everybody knows that this is the play. We are testing today a pandemic situation. What do we do? Video calling capability needs to be available and working. You should be getting the message or the instruction from your line manager, for instance, not to come to work the following day because there's a pandemic or there's a flooding in the office. Once you are going to sit from home, what are you supposed to do? Do you need to have a work area? Do you need to have VPN access? Do you have your VPN access? Has it been tested? Do you have internet access at home? These are some of the things that you put in the playbook so that for every scenario, everything that needs to be documented per that scenario is made in a concise, actionable format that the user of the playbook will be able to write. Yeah, so in conclusion, that is what the playbook concept does to solving the problem of documenting the plan and creating the awareness. We use the playbook a lot in Standard Chartered. For every scenario, we have a playbook. For every possible incident that you might think of, we have it as part of our playbook. So whoever is responsible for business continuity management holds the playbook, and the playbook has all the scenarios. So if you're going to do a testing exercise or a simulation exercise, all you have to do is announce that this is the scenario we are going to test, and everybody knows what to do. If you do enough testing, everybody understands how many times the testing is being done. They understand what their responsibilities are, and they understand how the recovery process should flow from one step to the other. Now, I'll also touch briefly on factors to consider during a crisis event. Crisis events could end up in tragedies and also provide opportunities for a lot of things that you would not normally have allowed in normal times to pass through. So I put this in 3 broad areas that you can look out for. That is what we also do. So the first area is increased cyber attack opportunities. Because of the COVID pandemic we are having right now, there are so many cyber attack campaigns or COVID-themed campaigns going via social media and also through emails in the form of phishing attacks. A lot of threat actors, hackers, are using COVID-19 as a team to send phishing emails to people because they know that everybody is interested. Everybody wants to know the numbers around the world. Everybody wants to know the cure. So if I'm a hacker, for instance, I can put in a malware that normally, if I send you a message that you have won the lottery, your information security officers have told you if you receive those kind of mails, don't open them. But if I put a malware in an email and I send it to you that this is the number of COVID infections in Ghana, I'm sure a lot of people will open that email. You open, I tell you, click on this link to check on the new numbers. Or I tell you that there's a cure, there's a vaccine now. Click on this to see the details around the vaccine. You will get a lot of people. And this is one of the increasing risk that we've seen in the area of cyber attack opportunities. We also have awareness campaigns to consider. In this time, it is very key to remind all your employees, remind your families, remind everybody around you that attackers will use this opportunity to attack you. If somebody sends you some of these things, you consider that it's not every resource that you have to read, right? If you want information, go to the right sources. Know which ones are the credible sources to read from, and go to those sources directly. So I saw one test, one of these WhatsApp messaging that somebody said you can actually do your COVID testing on the phone. So click on the link to do the test. And I was wondering how that is possible. Because to do a COVID test, they have to take a sample from you and take it through a lab. And how can your phone now be the test. But I actually got people who opened it up. People forwarded it to me, and I was wondering if the awareness campaign is not hitting out enough. But these are some of the factors to consider. The second broad area to consider are your third-party dependence. Like I mentioned earlier on, every business today depends on one third party or the other. If third parties who are part of your critical chain are having issues or are not able to survive a pandemic, invariably it affects you. So one of the things that you do is that as part of your third-party risk management process, at the time of onboarding third parties, you need to check them out, do the right due diligence, and also see some of the evidences that they have in place to confirm that if they say they have a business continuity plan, they actually have it and they've tested it. Look at the last time that they tested it. What were some of the issues raised? Have they fixed it? Those are some of the things that you check. And in the face of a pandemic, if you're an organization that has not already done that, it's not too late. You can quickly still have some service management calls with your third parties and find out how they are doing. At this time, they might not be ready to give you too much information because they probably know that you're asking because of the times we are in. But it's good to have an idea of what is happening on their side so that if there's any reaction that you can plan on your own side, you can quickly do that to react and keep your business in operations. Then we have also another big area, which is deviation management. In the midst of a pandemic such as this one, several changes that were not planned or have not been properly thought through may be required. So it might not be possible to stop all of them or prevent those changes from happening because at the time they might seem to be the only solution to some of the problems you may be having within the organization. So one of the things that you need to do is to keep proper track of any new request, any new change that is requested and that is implemented, because you might have to go back to revisit them and normalize them, right? If somebody says we need to implement a system now, for example, I use Zoom as an example because that is very common. We didn't have an online meeting platform before. Normally, your organization has testing and approval process to get any solution in place. But because it was a pandemic and we still need to reach out to people and we don't have time to test anything, and Zoom seems to be what everybody's talking about, let's use Zoom. There might be just basic security settings that could be put in place, but because of the rush, you might end up putting it into production without going through what you would normally have done. So that is what we refer to as deviation management. There needs to be proper tracking of any deviation from what you normally do. Logged, somebody should be holding a full log of all the deviations and give you the opportunity to go back to review them after you go back to normal times. So in a nutshell, these are the things that we do as a bank for each of the scenarios, and how we approach the planning, and how we get our business continuity plans and management in place. The ownership of it, assessing the risk, preparing the response plan to each scenarios, assigning roles and responsibilities, ensuring the right level of awareness, and testing for effectiveness and right fit, and try to incorporate it into our BAU as much as possible, so that when we need to invoke it, it does not become strange to the actors involved. So I think I'll bring the presentation to a pause here, and we can go through some Q&A sessions.
Thank you very much, Michael. So before I start with questions, I believe we already have a question from Timur. He sent it to me privately, so I'll read it out. His first is that he believes this model that you have outlined today is ideal for a large organization, and that for small businesses, the cost of implementing such a business continuity model will far outweigh the benefit of it to the small business. And so he's wondering whether you have a suggestion for small businesses. And then also he's asking whether business continuity planning can be outsourced.
Okay, that's a very good question. Thank you for that. The point of information security controls is not to overspend or overprotect any assets, right? So we talk about having steel walls guarding madhouses. If you have a small organization, that is why I try to be generic as possible in the planning steps. You don't need to have a very expensive business continuity plan, but you necessarily need to go through all the stages. Let me explain further. If you are a one-man company, right, a one-man shop, ultimately it means you'll probably be running everything on your own. But I'm sure that even as it stands, you do some form of business continuity planning, but it's not formalized. In that one-man shop, you know how you handle, I don't know what kind of business I could use as an example here, but you know who your suppliers are, you know who your customers are, you know how you communicate with them, you know what assets you need to be in place to be able to support the delivery of that service. If even you are a taxi driver, right, you know that the car is the main key, but doing regular maintenance is probably one of your business continuity planning activities. So if it requires you going through some of those planning to be sure that your servicing is done properly at the right time, you keep some funds available for scenarios where unexpected breakdowns happen, then it's possible. Secondly, in terms of ownership, if you're a very small company, small companies, the owners or the managers or the CEOs tend to double act a lot. So it means that you have to handle all these steps that we are talking about. There's, in my colleague's presentation, there was actually one slide that we looked at no-cost solutions. I will quickly bring that up now so that we go through it. Stephen.
Yes, Mike.
Yeah, I'll bring that up so that you walk us through it. All right, so you can go ahead now.
Okay, in response to the gentleman's question, like Mike said, you don't need to have an expensive BCP plan. The last three slides basically talks about one and some no-cost solutions which anyone can implement, within your institution, be it whether you're a small business or a medium-scale enterprise. Basically, like what Mike said, you quickly have to create procedure in terms of evacuating and having an alternative location should any disaster happens. Going through the plans with them. Yes, you can have a plan, but if you do not test the plan and make sure you have remediated all the issues that you have during the testing, these things carry no cost and can be easily done in any institution. Mike also touched on the issue about third parties. You need to have your emergency contact list, be it your third parties or your employees in case there is a disaster. Okay, creating a list of your critical business contractors and who you need to contact during emergencies. For this particular crisis, we have built up a network of healthcare providers and emergency support systems, ambulance service, police service, and also contact or network at the testing center. So if we have any issue at hand, we basically trigger those actions and they pick up the cases as and when. And also having an inventory of your equipment, including your hardware, backing up. You can also back up your systems just in case you lose your data in a cyber attack, which can also be considered as a disaster. On the second slide, Mike, we have some under 500 solutions which certainly can be done for small and medium scale businesses. I'll go through briefly. Backing up your record in critical data. I'll stress on critical data. Mike has made the point about not losing your data, because that is really critical in a situation for example, a bank where we rely on data to serve our clients. You can elevate unvaluable inventory and electrical machinery off the floor based on where your business is located. So if you're a business located, let's say, around the coastal areas or low-lying areas, if you have some critical equipment, you can just buy, let's say, a pallet. I'm just making things simple so you understand. You buy a pallet or any slab that can lift up your critical equipment or electrical machinery that can be affected. Let's say if the pandemic that happens is a flood, or you are in a flood prone area. From a cyber angle, simple tools like having antivirus softwares or firewalls, Mike went detailed into that, on your systems can protect you in an instance where you have malware attacks. I think we had some a few months ago, ransomware, where there was this attack on major businesses around the world. So installing some of these antivirus softwares, I'm sure wouldn't cost much to a small or medium scale enterprises. And there are basic preventive methods in terms of having fire alarm systems in your premises. These small investments can help trigger a potential fire. We all know about the Ghana Revenue Authority building, which caught fire few months back. I'm sure if they had some of these systems, they could have averted the situation. You can also provide first aid training to the critical stuff that Mike talked about, just in case for this health pandemic that we have, if people are given minor or basic training in terms of how to handle some of these cases when they do occur, it will help in reducing the risk of, let's say, death or serious complications. And you can also take a look at your building HVAC system and electrical system. What we do as Standard Chartered Bank, 3 times a year, we have what we call building and electrical inspection. This would not cost a lot if you have a certified electrician. Yeah, they can go around your premises and just check, your lightning, your cabling, etc. Because these minor things, if not checked, can really have an effect in case there is a major fire outbreak in your premises. The last slide, that's the solutions that are basically over $500 spelled out here, where you have detailed actions to do in terms of installing automatic sprinkler systems, fire hoses, etc., and also having backups in terms of power for your building, etc. And one thing we should also note is considering additional insurance, in terms when you have business interruptions, for example, flood, earthquakes, etc. So yes, there are solutions for small and medium scale enterprise. You do not have to be a multinational to have a business continuity plan. You can simplify it to meet your business needs. And I'm sure once a disaster strikes, you'll be well prepared to meet and operate normally. Yeah, that'll be my answer, Mike.
Thank you very much, Stephen. So I can see that Augustine has a question, but before you ask your question, Augustine, let me find out from Michael whether he has anything further to add to what Stephen has.
Okay, I think there's a part about the question that can it be outsourced?
Yes.
All right. So my answer to that would be that you can get the services of a third party to assist you to go through the planning, but you have to own it. It's not something that you can just give out and assume that it's there. You have to own it. So they are part of it. If you're using systems or you have applications that you want to outsource, for example, into the cloud, that is okay from a systems perspective. But in terms of the business continuity program, you have to own it. You can get help from external people, but you have to own it. Does that answer your question?
I'm sure it does. Thank you very much, Michael.
Right.
Augustine, please go ahead and ask your question now.
Hi, Adjoa, thanks. So I've got two questions, one for each speaker. I'm a guest and I'm with the British High Commission, the FCO. So for the first speaker, I wanted to find out what is the full scope for a business continuity, for the business continuity planning? Does it only take into consideration changes to the processes of doing a business when a crisis happens, or it would get to the point where we need to review the core business strategy itself? That's the first question. And then the second question on cybersecurity, especially for Stanchart, what extra layer of security has the bank implemented of it? And then a much more broader question, how would costs associated with cybersecurity and business continuity planning, changes to doing business, be absorbed by companies? Do you anticipate they'll be passed on to consumers, or will businesses absorb them? And how long businesses absorb these extra costs? Thank you.
Thank you, Augustine, for that question. Stephen, would you like to go first? So my response to that would be that we have not taken security in isolation, right? We have looked at the whole plan holistically, considering several scenarios, and put in place a lot of security layers to ensure that authentication is secure, to ensure that we do not allow our systems to connect to the internet without any controls, to ensure that the right people have access to the right systems, to ensure that not every scenario would be accommodated if we don't deem it secure enough, to ensure that the plan has been tested, and where it needed additional, bolstering, that has been done as well, and all that. So in terms of security per se, there are security capabilities underlying every system that we have used to support our business continuity. But basically, we are still looking at it from ensuring confidentiality of our data, and that the information asset cannot be modified without the proper controls, and ensuring the availability at all times. So that is the response to your question. I'll let Stephen take the first part of the question as well.
Okay, yeah. In answering Augustine's question, the first point to note is for a bank, like Mike said, having a business continuity plan is a regulatory requirement for the bank. So for us, we have an alternative site, which should be located at above a specific distance from your head office, where in case there is a disaster or pandemic, anything, you are able to continue providing the critical systems or services at that site. And that site should be fully equipped. There should be regular checks and tests, exercises, etc. We do it 3 times in a year. In terms of the scoping, I think Mike went through the 5 key points. I'm sure maybe you've had an impression this is for large organizations, but if you take the points from a high level, from a top high level, you realize that you can customize it to your specific business, and creating certain scenarios that are specific to the risk exposures in your particular business, and having the strategy or plan to work around and make sure your business is operational in case any of those risk exposures do occur within your business. I hope I've answered the question.
Unfortunately, we need to end this shortly. And so, Michael and Stephen, if you could just send your contact email addresses by instant message to all, then maybe if there are any other people that have questions, that are unable to ask them before we end this, they can email you directly if you don't mind and ask you. But Sarah Adelaide has been waiting for quite a while, so I'll have her ask her question.
Okay, so this is a quick one. My name is Sarah Adelaide. I'm with the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce. You mentioned that as at February, you had started, stocking up on a lot of things that would help when the pandemic was announced. But I want to find out, so who actually triggers the business continuity plan? Who and how do you determine when the right time to put it into action?
To answer your question, for Standard Chartered Bank, with regards to our BCP plan, we have stages where we trigger, or activate our crisis management team that really rolls out the BCP plan. So at the stage that I spoke about, that was at the 3rd of February, we were in the preparation stage. So let me just list the stages. We have the preparation stage, we have the containment stage, and we have the pandemic stage. So at that time where we ordered, the supplies, etc., we were in the preparatory stage where at that time the pandemic had not yet hit Ghana. However, you need to trigger, your business continuity plan. The crisis management team has to meet and prepare ahead of, the crisis that is, crawling near to the borders of Ghana. So that was the point at which we started, stocking up supplies of our safety materials and sanitizer, etc. As soon as we got to the containment stage, that is when you had cases in Ghana, then we trigger our partial BCP or full BCP. So I hope I've answered your question.
Was it Maxwell?
Yeah, this is Maxwell.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to find out that considering the cost that comes with business continuity testing and all that, how often do you have to trigger it within the framework in order to assure yourself that it is really effective and it's working? How often do you have to do that?
Okay, I'll use Standard Chartered Bank as an example. So we actually, I'll use the word test. Mike went through the stages of testing. We actually test our business continuity plan 3 times a year. And it's not just like a whole business. Every function has a checklist of what they had to do. This is a live test where they move away from the businesses, check if the systems are working, the alternative sites. Are there any issues regards to power, connectivity, etc.? So we do it 3 times a year. We have the live test, and we also do what we call the desktop testing, where we have various scenarios with the relevant stakeholders. Depending on the topic or the scenario, we bring in the relevant stakeholders to have a desktop session where we go through the possible threats to the business and how the business is going to respond in case any of these things do occur. So there's a desktop testing which you can do in your offices, and there's also a live testing where you test the systems that support your businesses, like Mike outlined.
Okay. So thank you very much, Michael and Stephen. Unfortunately, we have another call at 3 p.m. Ghana time, but 4 p.m. UK time. So it sounds to me like this is a conversation that perhaps we need to repeat, and I hope that you are amenable to joining us again, because I have a feeling that there are other participants on here who may have had comments or questions which they unfortunately were not able to ask. But I noticed that Michael did message his email address. And if anybody would like to email him, you can pick it up from the chat window and then reach out to him. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Michael and Stephen. Thank you very much, Clemencia, for organizing this. And we're very grateful. And
thank you, Ajoba.
You're welcome. We will put the slides after this out on our website.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Ajoba.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.